Bienvenue and welcome to Sunday at the Segal, the first one that we have held since last February, when we got together to talk about small mouth sounds and mindfulness. By the way, the production won a week ago at the Montreal English Theatre Awards, 2 prizes, outstanding direction to Caitlin Murphy, and outstanding lead performance to Warona Setsuelo. I just wanted to mention that. Congratulations to the whole team. I am Sarah Deshaies, your moderator today. It is a delight and honor for me to be steering this conversation about Underneath the Lintel by Glen Berger, coming to the Segal with 3 showings next weekend under very extraordinary circumstances. We are streaming to you at your home on YouTube and Facebook today via the internet, but I would like to acknowledge that most of our panelists, and the Segal Center are located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Kanien'kehá:ka Nation is recognized as the custodians of the land and waters on which we gathered today, called Tiohtià:ke or Montreal, historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations, and today home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. Today, we will proceed much like we do at our usual Sunday at the Segal, sadly minus the brugelach and the coffee, but happily no one has to go out in the cold. I hope you have something delicious to nosh on and a warm beverage at hand. I will first introduce our subject matter today, then our 5 wonderful panelists, followed by a discussion of about 40 minutes. You are invited to post questions at any time in the comments, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. And around 12:45, we will be picking queries for our Q&A. I'm sure we're going to have a ton of great questions for today's conversation. So let's begin. What is the longest time you've gone without returning a book to the library? Well, in our play, 1 borrowed volume is returned late, very late. In fact, 113 years late. And one librarian in a tiny Dutch town takes note. Intrigued by the book, a beat-up travel guide, and curious about its tardy, anonymous borrower, our librarian sets off on a round-the-world journey. Armed with some clues, including a dry cleaning ticket, lots of saved up vacation time, and a thirst for answers, and no one to keep him rooted, the librarian stumbles onto a centuries-old mystery that touches on everything from klezmer music to fox hunting, loneliness, and Christian mythology, and more. He is the hero of Underneath the Lintel, a one-man show written by Glen Berger. It was first produced in Los Angeles back in 2001. Presented later that year in New York City, though that production was delayed by a few weeks following the attacks of September 11th. There have been over 450 performances off-Broadway, and the show has traveled as much as The Librarian does. Productions in over 55 cities in 8 countries so far. Richard Schiff of The West Wing and The Good Doctor has been one of the most notable librarians so far. The Segal Center and Théâtre du Nouveau Monde are collaborating together for the very first time on this production. It was first presented in September at TNM Stage near Place des Arts, in French under a different name, Zebrina. Actor Emmanuel Schwartz plays the librarian in both versions. He's fully bilingual, a true rising star in the theater scene, and earlier this fall he performed to a mixed audience. Distant attendees at the theater and customers at home, like myself. I caught one of the shows. Of course, with the ongoing restrictions set by the province on arts venues, we won't be able to see a live show in a theater before, at the least, January 11th, 2021. So the Segal is presenting Underneath the Lintel next week with 3 showings beamed to you at home. I hope you have your ticket booked already. This has been an extraordinary time for everyone, and the theater world has had to adapt just like every other industry. Unfortunately, it means the audience is missing shows and some artists have less work, but this also presents an opportunity to think and work creatively. So today we are looking at producing theater and creating art in a pandemic, as well as reaching audiences virtually. I will now present to you your panelists, starting with Glen Berger, the playwright. Hello, Glen.
Hello.
And I want to start off, I just want to make sure, am I pronouncing your last name correctly? Do you do Berger or Berger?
Berger.
Berger, perfect. All right. And where are we reaching you today?
I'm in upstate New York, a couple hours north of the city.
Lovely. You're close to us, but still so far. So Glen, welcome. Underneath the Lintel is just one of his many award-winning plays. Glen's career started at the Annex Theater in Seattle. He spent a decade in New York. He is also an Emmy-winning TV writer. I have to note, head writer on the children's series Arthur, which was a favorite of mine. He also co-wrote the book for Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, the Broadway show with music by Bono and The Edge. Glen wrote a memoir about that experience, Song of Spider-Man, and he now lives in Hudson Valley with his wife and 2 children. François Girard is our director, and this is his debut at the Segal. Welcome, François. He has worked on a wide array of projects, from movies like The Red Violin and Hochelaga, Terre et Âme, to Cirque du Soleil, to theater productions like En attendant Godot and Le Procès de Franz Kafka at the TNM, operas like Oedipus Rex at the Canadian Opera Company, Wagner's Parsifal at the Met, and François has won 10 Genie Awards and 9 Jutras, as well as the Herald Angel Prize, not once, but 3 times at the Edinburgh Festival. Joining us as well, Elaine Normandeau, the Assistant Director and Stage Manager. Hello, Elaine. She works in both French and English theater, as well as in opera. You'll have seen a show she worked on here, Top Girls, back at the Segal in 2014. Elaine has collaborated with François before, including En attendant Godot, and she was the language coordinator for François' recent film, Hochelaga, and also works as a translator and surtitle creator. François Séguin is our set and props designer. After studying set design at Collège, hello, François.
Hi.
After studying set design at Collège Léon Magru and working in the theater scene, he landed his first assignment as a set designer in 1976. He has worked on theater and opera productions in Canada and abroad, including shows at the National Arts Centre in Ottawa. He has also worked with François before on productions like The Lost Objective. And finally, our librarian, Emmanuel Schwartz. Hello, Emmanuel. He first incarnated the role of this production earlier this fall, as I mentioned, in French at Théâtre du Nouveau Monde. Emmanuel graduated from the CJAD Producer theater program in 2004. In the past years, has racked up roles in theaters all over Montreal, with his debut in Soif Matériaux at Espace Go. He's worked with François previously at TNM in En attendant Godot, and you've seen him in Liliad, Candide, Tartuffe, and more. He's also performed in film, including Matthew Rankin's recent The 20th Century. So welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Welcome.
I think we'll start with Glen, because I'm very curious to know how the play came to be, and also curious to know about the first time it was performed in New York City. How did you come up with the story?
Well, I never know quite how to answer that question because they just show up eventually. I knew that I wanted something that took up a lot of that represented a lot of scope and scale, because I always think that unless we've got a really wide perspective on the human experience, then we're not really going to understand the human experience. So I'm always on the lookout for something like that. I've been listening to a lot of klezmer music, especially recordings from the 1920s, these sort of scratchy, minor keyed Jewish jazz songs, and something in it really resonated with me. I knew there must be a play in there somewhere. And I was also, for whatever reason, really enamored at the time, and still am, with small scraps of paper, with, with train tickets from, the turn of the century, just little bits of ephemera that end up showing. I think, maybe there was an envelope for a postcard that was in a used book that I bought once, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. Anyway, That was step one. Step three, play. Step two, I don't know.
Thank you so much. And the ephemera and the klezmer music come into play in the show quite nicely. Like that's really a big part of it. François Girard, Mr. Director, why is the show so fitting for the moment we're living in? I'm curious what drew you to Underneath the Lintel.
Well, like there's a little bit of coincidence with the pandemic and circumstances. My story with Underneath the Lintel starts 20 years ago when I directed a first solo show called Novecento, and that's from author Alessandro Barrico. 10 years later, François Séguin was designing that show. And then 10 years later, I did another one that's it's called A Hunting God. And that was written by Japanese novelist Yasushi Inoue. And then we came up with the idea to complete the cycle and do a trilogy of 3 solo shows. And that's a few years ago. We started looking for a third play, a third text, and that proved to be quite difficult. We found Serge Lamotte, who translated Underneath the Lintel and is the dramaturg on this production. And we looked for text. We found some, but never quite the right complement until I read Glen's Underneath the Lintel, which I immediately fell in love with, and it connects with many of my, I guess, my interests, traveling the world and the various cultures, and then we just like settled to work on it, and then it turned like as I started working on it, then we were into the pandemic, and what was planned to be a trilogy somewhere became a solo show here. So the pandemic was I mean, in the context, like like Underneath the Lintel happened to offer the perfect conditions for a reduced audience and a very simple show with, starring Emmanuel.
I wonder if we could go back to the production in the fall and how that went and what was kind of going through your minds as you were preparing for a show that had people in the audience, but spaced out and people watching at home. And I'm not sure who would like to tackle that because mostly everyone here was working on that production. François or Emmanuel, what was that experience like?
It was really well. First of all, a very original experience. I mean, it's not something that we're used to doing. Even webcasting theater is something that we're kind of getting used to in this particular situation. And I think that the actual experience in the theater with having distanced audience and people sitting, far apart from each other, but still having, let's say, a person. I think it was one spectator for 5 seats or something like that. So in the 900 seat hall, we had about 150 people, and it really felt like it gave something, like it added to the intimacy relationship that I had with the audience anyway. And it was really a lot of fun. And as you touched on earlier, there is a beautiful coincidence between the text and this situation, because the librarian says in the opening lines, "Are we sure that this is all there is?" Referring to the number of audience members in the hall, kind of disappointed that there wasn't a bigger turnout. So that's like a lovely coincidence between the text and the situation, even though there's not much love, not much else is lovely about this pandemic. And so I guess the fact that it was transmitted simply adds to the idea that we're going to keep acting, we're going to keep creating through hard times, and that's just a testament to, I mean, the beauty of art and our will keep going. So
had things been normal, had there been no pandemic and Emmanuel was on stage as normal, you would have had 900 people or capacity for 900 people in the audience, and instead just 150.
Right.
Well, that's remarkable. What kind of challenges, I'll throw that out to the team, but what challenges exist in rethinking a play, knowing that there might be people present, but mostly people are at home? Is it very different from preparing for a regular theater production?
Well, I think, we're like, this is a live forum, and we, of course, all adapt, and the circumstances of the outside world, like, are informing the play and the work we do. So, yes, it would have been different. And if you play it, and it was different in any case from what Glen created in the first place in New York. So where there's a communication between what we call the play, the text, and when it's played in the world in which it plays. So, but I think one thing I would say is that for us, like, it was extremely therapeutic because we were all like isolated in our Zoom calls, and suddenly we got to work together and gather again in the theater, and that was an immense joy. Like, so I guess I'm speaking for everybody here.
Yep.
Would anyone like to add to that, or like the challenges that come from producing for live streams instead of live audiences? Is it disappointing to know that people won't be in the theater when this happens next weekend? Glen, did you want to add to that?
You have to open your mic.
Oh, there you go.
Got it. I mean, the only thing I'll add is that the thing that that allowed me to, the spark that actually got this play originally on stage was the notion that just tickled me, that was that the librarian, our one person, had really never been on a stage before. So this idea that you're figuring it out as you go along, this idea of this naivete, this sort of clumsy, awkward situation that he finds himself in, to me, provides a certain freshness and a certain humanity. And so the idea that these people have to figure out how to put on this play in novel circumstances, I'm enjoying from New York, because I think it does actually speak to the essence of the play.
I was going to ask about the restrictions and how there's been this kind of unpredictability hovering over the Quebec theater scene for months now. Glen, what are things like where you are in terms of productions? Is theater totally on hold? Is there any sense of uncertainty?
Yeah, it's completely on hold, as far as I know. I mean, Broadway is dark, and there was some attempts, I think this summer, there was a little production nearby where, they had to basically live together in quarantine for a number of weeks. And then, everyone stands straight and look out. I mean, now I think everyone's just given up, and we're just biding our time until this thing runs its course.
Thank you, Glen. I know here in Montreal, we've had kind of a mix. A lot of shows were either that people were planning to do some live theater, and then the government would wait in a couple of days before people were set to perform. And so what's happened is a lot of live streamed plays and dance. Some just being performed once or twice. Other theaters like TNM have managed to do like weeks of showings, which with people from home. I'm going to throw that out to the whole team. We only learned about the extension of the restrictions 2 weeks ago, I think, that we would not be able to do performances in December and beginning of January, just weeks ago. I guess you can always assume for the worst and assume that you won't be back performing, but a lot of small companies were planning to have a show in the last weekend of November, the first week of December. Can we talk about what that's like? Does it feel like a roller coaster, not knowing, can I perform next week or not?
We're doing theater to do theater. It's like working on mirages. I speak for myself. I mean, I never know whether we're actually, which of all of the theories is going to come true. So we were supposed to have a small audience. We were hoping for a small audience at the Segal, and suddenly we don't. Suddenly we're just live streamed. So you never know. So you're planning for this, but you also have to plan for the other option at the same time. It's wearing everybody down, I think, in the theater community, and particularly people running the theaters, the production managers and the general managers and the artistic directors who have to hold different scenarios, all of these different scenarios, waiting to see which one might actually come true.
François, François Girard, would you add anything to that? Like knowing that there's kind of possibility A and possibility B?
Well, of course it's not ideal. None of this is ideal. And is it ever ideal? We have a conception of theater that is a gathering of a full house in front of a live performance. This is what theater means. But now, like, we're like confronted to extraordinary circumstances, and then we're adapting. Ultimately, it's a little bit like, you know, when we make movies, and then somebody says that he's seen your film on an airplane. Like the film, like the ideal situation for a movie is like 3,000 people sitting in front of an impeccable, pristine projection, but that is, you know, one ideal, and ultimately the real magic happens in the communication between brains and brains, and what's in the middle, we might conceive a perfect zone of comfort or a perfect way to celebrate theater or film, but in the end, all that matters is what's left in people's brains, from starting with Glen's writing and then Emmanuel appropriating it into his performance, and how we surround that with the set, François' set and soundtrack. Ultimately, it's all about printing. We're printers. We're printing imagery, ideas into people's brains and communicate with them. And then I think even in the context of a webcast, that is still possible. I think Glen's, I've seen Manu perform in both forms, and ultimately, I'm following the text. You know, I'm following the story, the character, and it will happen again at the next week at the Segal.
Thank you, François, and I'm so looking forward to seeing the show next weekend, because I'll be able to compare it to what I saw at TNM earlier this fall, and kind of make notes as someone who likes to think like pretty not critically, but yeah, like think about what I've seen. I'm eager to have that experience of the two languages and the two different sets. Speaking of sets, you just mentioned François Séguin's work. François, I wanted to turn it to you. The guidance that Glen gives is kind of basic at the very beginning. There's a chair that no one is going to sit in. We touched a little bit on the librarian's, it's a performance that starts. He's speaking to a room full of people and he's like, are we sure there's not more people here? Tell me about how you conceived of this kind of minimal set. But the trick is, right, is that he's in one room presenting to a group of people, but he's traveling all over the world. Like, it's wild, like China and Australia, New York, London, like just to name a few of the locations the librarian travels to in his mind. Let us into some of your work designing the set.
When we decided to do this this performance at the TNM, basically we went to the theater. There was a set left there from the production that kind of had to stop in the middle of it. So we decided, we said, okay, should we have a set that it's there in the theater? And basically we said no. It's just the stage is at the level, we don't know what's the production's coming, but there's a production's coming or coming down, and one day the virus arrived and everything stopped. So we went from there. And in Glen's text, he goes from a barely auditorium conference feeling to suddenly it's a theater. We assume now it's a theater. So at the TNM we did move some scenic element that, you know, it was a working space and suddenly the drapes come down, everything comes together, and at the end it's a black box. And for all the traveling and information, François and I, we decided to go with projection, and without being too literal, so we decided to go with the map, saying what's the map. So we have the map of London, we have the map of we go in the map, and when we start traveling, basically it's graphic, and that's it. So it was not at the Segal we had to adapt, because obviously it's not it's not the proscenium stage. So it's a little bit less elaborate as a concept, but it's we go from an open space to a theater space again.
Thank you. Glen, maybe I can point to you just because you're the writer and you're here. What was when you give minimal kind of design, like suggestions at the beginning of the play, what's the goal? What are you thinking of when you're just like, a man enters a room, there's a chair, it's like a conference hall. What are you trying to convey?
I used to be far more dictatorial about it has to be this and that, and then I slowly learned to give the director and the other designers a little more latitude, because they ignored it anyway. So but the idea, I love in theater, it's like going to see a hypnotist, and because I think the first minutes of any show, the audience is still bringing their life from wherever they came from into the theater, and you have to gently massage them and cast a spell, basically, and the best productions do it effectively and hopefully as quickly as possible, so that you're sort of you're shifting their brain to the the right hemisphere more and more, so that you can create more suggestions in their brains. And so the idea being that you start with this lecture, this fellow who isn't very even used to lecturing, and subtly, at a certain moment, the audience shouldn't be able to say exactly when it was, but now they realize that they're in an entirely different space, where they can accept greater and greater dreamlike possibilities.
I have to continue on that, because I think we followed François will be my witness here. Like we used to throw the scene indications, like the scene descriptions, to away, and then appropriate the text. And here we're very faithful to Glen's scenes indications. But I have to say, where he's describing a theater that comes to life, basically awakening. But there's an extra dimension, and that's exactly the trigger when I decided to call TNM and Lisa at the Segal, Lisa Rubin. And the morning I read an interview with Glen, where I understood that the Underneath the Lintel was not allowed to perform because of September 11, they had to wait. It's almost as if I saw the awakening vocation of that text. And then I said, okay, let's go. I called Lorraine and I called left and right. And then we found ourselves in a position where we were reopening the TNM for real. So this guy shows up. First thing he does is he's switching off the ghost light, which, is the indication of a closed theater. And the theater wakes up. And the same will happen at the Segal, and the same will happen at the National Arts Center in January. So it's all I think we were in a way the vehicles all collectively of Glen's text vocation of awakening, reopening, so it has, and then you start to play and there's no set and there's nothing, it's a bare theater, and slowly the theater magic grows and you leave the place theater's back. So that was like we felt that mission collectively, I think.
Yeah.
Manu, I don't know if you want to add to that, like.
Well, I think there's something about the character that's also it's metaphorical for his entire life, but in the time of the play, you also feel that awakening and that opening up of the character. As Glenn mentioned a bit earlier, this is he's not at ease in front of people. He's probably not very good at it. And as he goes deeper into his story, he kind of emancipates himself of these fears and of these of his hesitation, and finally he himself, becomes immersed in his own journey, and I guess the transformation of the theater is also a metaphor for the transformation of the librarian himself, and his journey towards self-liberation and
he wakes up that night,
freedom,
but he also wakes up in his life meeting on the tracks of the Wandering Jew. Like, so in a way, like it's a 4 or 5 layers of awakening. So probably we're thanks to Glen's text, like we're all a little more awakened and enlightened. I guess that's the meaning of that text, awakening text.
That's so wonderfully put. And François, it's so interesting to hear that you were considering the play, but it took reading an interview that Glen had done to kind of light that spark under you that this was the play that you had to do. If I'm understanding correctly, that's what happened.
I was working for a trilogy 2 years down the line, and when I read that, like, there's a Monday morning where I decided to go deeper in the text, and probably within 24 hours, I called François Séguin, Elaine Normandeau, Manu. Like, it needed Manu because, like, a one-man show is like always, it's my third, and it's a great adventure. It's in many ways way more ambitious than a cast of 75 because it becomes very intimate and fragile. It is a huge production. It's a huge mission. And I'm very grateful that I got to do that right with Emmanuel. And so, but it's not, I wouldn't have done it with any actor. So I called Manu like right off the top. François, of course, we share productions on all fields. Elaine, dear companion. Within 24 hours, we were on. And then I called Lauren Pétal first. And I said, Lauren, I think I have a solution for your problems. Because at the moment, everybody in theaters, in opera houses, they're all trying to figure out, they all have a big, huge headache, and they're trying to figure out how to reopen. So we're glad that we were able to offer this one as an opportunity.
François, I want to ask, and I hope this doesn't put Emmanuel on the spot too much, but why was Emmanuel the one actor you needed for this role?
I mean, well, first of all, we have an ongoing, you mentioned, like he did Lucky in En attendant Godot. François was there, Ellen was there. He was also in Chez la Terre des Âmes. He was playing the wonderful dying soul. So, but I follow Manu's work, and Manu is like right now I'm reaching a complete state of maturity, in which I think a text like this requires. And it's a match. We're matchmakers. So you got a character, you got an actor. You say, how about you guys sleep together for a while? and then I think that marriage was a very happy one. We did another run yesterday. The first complete run in English, and it's so satisfying to see what Manu does with Glen's words. And also the other factor with Manu right now that's very unusual is that Emmanuel is a perfect bilingual, like Elaine, by the way, and that's very rare. We have many actors who can speak in English, like some of them not better than me. But Manu grew up in French and English, and now we're gonna be we've done the text in French, translated by Serge Lamotte, and then now we're back to the original version, and that is so interesting. Like and I know only one actor in the around who can do that.
I'd like to come back to the French and English collaboration towards the end of our conversation, but no pressure, Emmanuel. I want to flip it back to you. To me, this is really interesting to observe because I followed your work, and you were like, when I walked through Place des Jardins, the mall downtown, in front of Place des Arts, I still see your face. Like, there's a huge poster with you and like 2 other stars for some production that was like back in the spring, February or March. You are a bona fide vedette in the theater side in French. And I'm not sure if there's as much recognition yet on the English side. And people are going to be curious about you and to know, who is this fellow Emmanuel and how is he going to carry this 90-minute show all in English? What is this like for you? It's almost like am I wrong to call it a debut of sorts for the English theater side here in Montreal?
It most definitely is a debut, that's for sure. But I also feel like it's sort of a date with destiny because I've always been, thirsty and I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. As you mentioned, I grew up in English and in French. I actually grew up in an English neighborhood in NDG in Montreal, but all my schooling was in French. So I've always been really on both sides of Quebec culture in that sense. And I've done really a bit, but not a lot, but just a bit of film work in English. And I've always felt because the theater world, the English theater world in Montreal is quite small. I feel like English actors, English directors, go to bigger cities where there are bigger English milieus, and so opportunity has never presented itself for me to do this, and it just and with my companion François, who I'm really we have a wonderful working relationship and a friendship going, and I really trust his instinct and his vision. I really couldn't think of a better situation to start my English theater life.
And I know our audiences will be curious to know as well. You're half, not, I hate that expression of half Jewish, but you were raised Jewish or have a Jewish parent. And is that also extra special? The fact that this is at the Segal and with the plot line of this story, it's quite apropos. Or is it meaningful for you?
Most definitely. I mean, it's really like a kind of a 2-for-1 for me because I mean that is part of my English heritage, or near orthodoxy or anything like that. But it is part of my story, and it was part of the things of the celebrations that we had when my grandparents were still alive. And it's just something that I've never was able to tap into or express in my French theater experience. So it really is. It really opens up a whole whole bag of memories and feelings that's just so. It's very rich for me. A very rich experience to be able to tap into all that.
I think in this whole ride, like if Emmanuel and I had one disagreement, it's on the bloodline of the character, like where Manu was claiming that the character was Jewish, and I was claiming the opposite, and then we had to take Glen as a referee, and I was accusing Manu to pollute the play with his ancestry, and then it got really tense. It got really tense, but in the end, I think it will still be up to the audience to make their mind, up their mind. It's an open, remains to a certain degree an open question. But and this whole thing, the whole themes that are underneath not the lintel, but the text, it's very rich. It's a very open mythology, and then we all had great time discussing it all sort of ways.
I'm very curious to know about what it was like to be called in as a referee, Glen. I can't resist turning to you on this point. Is there a true answer? Is this character of a librarian who is on the trail of the wandering Jew? We can say that. I think people will know that this is coming. What did you say when you were asked to adjudicate?
Well, I think I was. A good referee doesn't it's trying to stay objective and not take sides. I mean, I have my own thoughts about it, but it's up to each person. I mean, what is important though is to understand, because over the years I've gotten letters from folks complaining that the play is anti-Semitic, but other letters complaining that it's a little too pro-Semitic, in terms of, anti-Jesus, or, people will absolutely project their own thoughts and feelings on it, which is cool. At the end of the day, it's not even about really any of that. It's something that has it's a much bigger question than religion.
Cosmic. It's cosmic.
Yes, it is. It must be so interesting to know that you put this project out into the world in your various different roles, but ultimately you have very little control over how people are going to feel and what they take away from it, right? But that's kind of the risk in it.
Yeah, you learn as a playwright to be a bit of a Buddhist about it all. You do. I mean, or any parent that once they hit 18 and they leave the nest, there's very little you can do about it. But and you're heartbroken sometimes, and other times you're reminded that that's why you do it, because you'll see these other interpretations that never would have entered your mind.
Is it Paul? I think it's Paul Valéry. He said, "You know what you do, but you don't know what you do is doing." It goes into the world and it has its own life.
I mean, and if you're lucky, other ones just die at conception. But this one I've been very lucky with, and and to be able to see this particular production is absolutely unique for on many different levels, even before the this whole situation, and then add this on top of it, and I'm absolutely I'm grooving on it. I think it's such a wonderful new little
a chapter in the play story, maybe.
What's that?
It's another. You're eager to see this chapter in your play's history being written.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, theater. Because we were talking about this, even without an audience in the theater itself, all theater relies on an audience, to make it more than just agitations of air and light dancing in the universe. In order for it to really be a play, it requires the minds of an audience, and so to have it in this more novel way is, I think it shakes it up in a healthy way.
Thank you, Glen. I would like to remind everyone watching at home that we are going to segue into our Q&A very shortly. So whether you're on YouTube or on Facebook, you can add a comment or a question. We want questions, please. I want to ask one last thing to everyone, which is, what is something the audience should be looking for next weekend when they see this production? It could be anything. Elaine, is there something that you think people should watch for or pay attention to?
I have no idea how to answer that question. I will leave it to my colleagues.
François Séguin maybe would be as
I think they should watch very carefully when and learn when Emmanuel start dancing. He's dancing with the star.
There's a great dance number.
He's the
what
big
was that, Director François? What was that?
No, like, I mean, I agree with François. There's a great dance number right in the middle of the play that you should be all looking forward to experiencing.
And at this point, Glen is wondering,
Yeah.
what?
Glen knows.
What?
Emmanuel, is there anything, I don't know if this is weird as you're the main guy on stage, but is there anything you think the audience should look for or pay attention to?
I'd say look for the actor on stage. That'll be that'll be a start. But I think the whole play is as the character says, a lovely twisty mystery that's just fun to unravel. And every step of the way, there's something else to look for. Another piece of the enigma, another piece of the tale that just. And every step of the way, I think there's something new that is being revealed from it. From the beginning, it seems like it's some sort of a wild goose chase, and eventually we get into the realm of spiritual revelation, and eventually we get into personal freedom and personal openness and open-mindedness. So I think there's a whole bunch of stuff to look out for and to stay open for.
But Sarah, we're dancing and joking around your question, and it's tricky. I agree with Elaine. It's a tricky question because ultimately, it's one thing. What the work of Glen, of Manu, all of our work has to become that one moment, and we would like to think that you cannot split it in pieces. You'd like to think that this is this one journey that you're going to live for 100 minutes, and that is the moment where all of us disappear, and then the theater exists.
A perfect reference to what you said earlier in the show about the conference room disappearing and the theater appearing out of nowhere. Thank you so much for that. We will proceed to, we have 2 questions so far. From Mel. How hard is it to do a show in both English and French? And are there differences that come out with it? Especially to note that Serge Lamotte did the translation from Glen's work into French for the production you did earlier this fall. And now you are just using Glen's text for this presentation.
I would say it's a question for Manu, because we're all used to work in many languages, more than 2, and then we've done the same plays. But to perform it in 2 languages is the big achievement here.
Well, it's been a journey, and it's been a relatively short journey for the time that for a one-man show. I've done a few in my career, and usually we have a few more months to prepare. So this was relatively quick. So that was one of the difficulties, but the added difficulty was definitely to learn it first in the language of translation, and then return to the original text. That was a real challenge, because obviously a lot of English expressions can't be translated word for word or literally, and that's in every I think in every translation procedure there is some things you gain and some things you lose. So the doing everything so contracted, having this go on in only a few months, that was basically the main challenge, to tap into the rhythm of each language, but also the very particular meaning of a certain phrasing, and it's been, I must say, a real pleasure. Not that the French experience wasn't wonderful, it was, but it's been a real pleasure to get into Glen's text, because obviously there's so much detail and so many lovely idiolects pieces of video that Glen has created in the text that are just that make for a beautiful rhythm and beautiful musicality to the language. That's just it's just so great to say and to get into.
Thank you, Emmanuel. We'll go to our next question. How did we adapt the set for an online show? François, is that François Séguin?
Because we, François, we all decide to do the online from the point of view of one spectator. There's no cut. There's no. It's not like a captation of a play with many cameras. So we decide it's the Prince, basically Prince seat, and that's the show people are gonna see. It's from seat number whatever 3A, and that's the show. So we didn't adapt for in fact for the online performance. We just did the show for a theater audience and there's a camera in the middle of it.
Our next question is from Lisa, who's speaking on behalf of her mom. Will Glen be watching the live stream next weekend? And for François, actually, we'll let Glen answer that question first. Will you be joining us next weekend? Oh, you just have to unmute, Glen.
Oh, are we unmuted? Okay. Maybe, yeah. I hadn't. I mean, I should. My Wi-Fi is really sad. So if I can get that thing working, yeah. I was able to see what the work was in the French production. So and François has kept me in the loop in ways that some directors have no interest in keeping me in the loop. So I've been very grateful for that. Yeah, no. So actually, I would love to check in on that. You know, normally I don't get that opportunity when something is so.
As I mentioned at the top, this has been performed. I don't know in how many different countries. Many, that's for sure. But this pandemic is kind of neat in the sense that we've all transitioned to being more online than ever before, and so you're getting to see productions of your work that you may not have had the chance to travel to before.
Yeah, which isn't always a blessing. Sometimes it's best to just pretend that it's not happening. But you know, in this case, it would be a pleasure.
And the second half of that question was for François, director François, about directing for film and directing for theater, if there's any difference there, because you have a long history with film and theater, and could Underneath the Lintel be a movie one day?
Well, of course, film and theater have their differences, but I think a lot of what we said in the past hour is proving that they are a very similar process, and the goals are pretty much the same, and we end up working with the same people. All of these people here, except Glen, we haven't yet collaborated on anything that's film or TV, but everybody else did. And it's the same team, same people. You got a text, you want to bring it to the world. What does it mean? How do we bring it to the world? Those kind of questions, whether you address them in the context of theater or film, is to a certain extent irrelevant. And yes, we did have a couple of conversations with Glen about the possibilities to adapt Underneath the Lintel, and I think we share the same answer that it's this one belongs to theater. I think the story of the librarian, this late book, the book that comes back late, I think for whatever reason, like, belongs to theater. I don't think that the film medium would bring anything new or extra to the meaning of the piece.
Thank you. Fantastic questions. Thank you for submitting them. I want to leave on a note of the fact that this is a collaboration where this has been done in French and now it's being done in English. It's the first time the Segal Center and the Théâtre du Nouveau Monde have worked together, both theaters in Montreal with long histories and lots of accomplishments on both sides. Will we see more of this? Is there an opening for there to be more English-French collaboration to this extent? I mean, it does exist in other ways. Like, this is not the very first time this has ever happened to this degree, but is the time ripe for more collaborations like this? I'll leave the question open to anyone who'd like to answer it.
I think that there are actually, you know, François was saying that I'm the only actor he knows that's actually this bilingual, but I actually know a few around town. A lot on the English side that speak perfect French, but a few on the French side that do speak perfect English. And you know, Elaine could always work on all these productions because she's pretty much at our level in both languages. But I think that there would be potential for a bilingual troupe, bilingual company. Maybe that's something we'll look into eventually.
François Séguin designs in Chinese, Japanese, German, Russian. No problem.
And I'll just say as well that in the fall, I'm working on 2 productions that are co-productions between English and French theaters.
Fantastic.
So there is a movement towards that.
We have something to look forward to when all of this is over and we are back in theaters safely. I just recalled I did watch a live stream on Wednesday from Théâtre La Chapelle that was a bilingual production with surtitles in both languages. And it was so perfect because I could practice both languages, but also if the mic was a bit off, I could then read at the bottom what was being said. So it's live and it's happening. And this production, Underneath the Lintel, is just another example of what is just a really cool thing to be seeing in our 2 solitudes of the theater, which is there's not so much solitude there. One final question about the future of Underneath the Lintel as this production stands. François Girard, you mentioned National Arts Center. Are there plans for this to happen in the new year?
Well, I mean, like, we just had to skip 12 theaters. That's a heartbreaking thing, because all theaters in Quebec got shut down, and then we were supposed to play in 12 cities. I hope that this could happen another time. This production, we're also discussing with Japanese producers for Tokyo version of it, and I think you know, like, who knows what will happen. Like, again, we're going to be watching our own work go in different places, but like, we're not. Many things might happen, but these are the discussions at the moment.
Well, that's really exciting to hear about the future of this play, that it'll be seen by audiences in other cities. And once this pandemic winds down and we can all gather together safely again, I'm sure there's going to be so many more eyeballs that are going to get a chance to see this excellent production. We will conclude with that. A very big thank you to all of our panelists today for taking time on a Sunday. Glen Berger, playwright; François Girard, the director; Elaine Normandeau, working as stage manager; François Séguin as set design; and Emmanuel Schwartz, our librarian. Thank you to Gabriella Saltil, who pulled this all together, Lisa Rubin, and the whole team at the Segal Center. And a very big thank you to you watching from home today to be our guests. And stay safe, everyone. A happy Hanukkah and a holiday season. Enjoy the show next weekend. Bon spectacle, and we'll see you next time.